voice is loud, and it will be heard. It's time for the White House to step up and deny NAI.
There is a scheme currently underfoot that will take our jobs and offshore them to a company that wants to enrich itself at our expense. So we're here today attempting to prevent that.
It's time for the White House to step up and support U.S. jobs.
Denying NAI, or Norwegian Air International, is an important issue because if this scheme is allowed to go forward, not only will it erode U.S. jobs, fairness and labor standards, and good pay, but if the administration and Congress do not take action, we will see the loss of the U.S. airline industry just like we saw the loss of the U.S. maritime industry.
To be clear, NAI's business model erodes fair competition.
We're supposed to follow the law, we're supposed to play fair. We're not afraid of competition. We just need everyone to follow the rules.
NAI's business model runs contrary to U.S. trade policy, and it threatens U.S. aviation workers' jobs.
We have to stand up for our rights and the rights of other American workers and let the president know that he has to enforce treaties. Just as we follow the rules, those we compete with have to follow them as well. It's
time for the White House to step up and enforce our agreements.
We are on the right side of this issue. We have the law on our side. We have over 200 congressmen with HR 5090 on our side.
We need to change the mind of this administration and the DOT. NAI should not be allowed to fly to the United States because they are a flag of convenience business model, and that is prohibited under the air transport agreement with the EU. We've seen what the flag of convenience business model can do to an industry. Looking at the maritime industry in the United States, there were 100,000 maritime jobs in the United States in 1960. 50 years later, they're down to less than 2,500. That will be us in 50 years if we allow this to go forward.
This specific issue needs to be prevented and promoted because it will affect each pilot, each flight attendant, each transportation worker permanently. If this happens, our jobs will change forever.
Enough is enough. It's time for the White House and the DOT to honor its commitments, stand up for American workers, and deny NAI. Thank you. So we asked for your engagement, and wow, did you ever deliver? And your members answered with thunderous response. Our campaign to deny NAI is the most recent illustration of how quickly we can mobilize. It's evidence of our collective strength. It's living proof of a unifying spirit that reaches beyond the boundaries of generations, of the 30 different airlines we fly for, the number of seats in our aircraft, or what we carry. The implications of losing this flag of convenience battle eats away at our very core. It defines what our fundamental reason our union exists. It ensures the profession has a future. Whether the cause is safety or industrial, our cause is just in galvanizing unity, not only at that rally, but in response to our entire campaign, demonstrates that we are in this all together. Of our members, 16,627 have completed the Deny NAI call to action. Percentage-wise, and this is pretty amazing, these are our top 5 pilot groups. United Airlines with 57% of their pilots. Delta Airlines, 49% of their pilots. Spirit, 42% of their pilots. Virgin America, 37% of their pilots. Air Wisconsin, 32%. Thank you, Todd, John, Stuart, Joe, and Chris, for your leadership, rallying your pilots to engage. We all understand the implications of losing the NAI fight. It is the nose of the camel under the proverbial tent. A tentative decision to lay the groundwork for a scheme that could very likely decimate our industry is not going to happen. Our focus has not wavered. It remains the same since launching this campaign over 2 years ago. But on the cusp of this tentative decision, we have renewed reason to mobilize. And as you saw in that video, this battle brought our pilots and the entire aviation community together as one no other issue has. And beyond airline pilots, we garnered the support from tens of thousands of the public, more than 200 bipartisan members of Congress, and even one U.S. presidential candidate in support of our campaign. During last month's ALPA convention that ALPA hosted down in New Orleans, we had 100-plus pilot associations resolve to band together to stop this scheme that employs bad labor practices and that will begin a race to the bottom. Because let's be clear, if NAI wins, and it will be the first airline, it will not be the last. And they will undercut our wages and our careers. On Monday, we filed our 42-page legal response to the tentative decision. And I'm not a lawyer, and I'm sure Russ and Dave, if they're in the room, are going to get nervous. But in essence, the decision says this. The tentative decision by the Department of Transportation to approve NAI's application for a foreign air carrier permit is A, simply not in accordance with the law, B, at odds with almost 70 years of DOT practice, and C, an utter failure to properly interpret the terms of the U.S.-EU Air Transport Agreement, namely to ensure that the agreement is not applied in a manner that undermines existing labor legal rights and standards. Now, the frustrating part, like before, we wait for the DOT to make another announcement. That could come in a week, a month, or another 2 years. But we all know our collective resolve on this issue stands strong, across unions and across the globe. And I'm confident that when called upon again, you and your members will engage with veracity. So pilot engagement, it is indeed a powerful tool, one that does not go unnoticed, and one that always leaves a mark. Later today, we'll vote to approve the merger of the Frontier Airlines Pilot Association with our union. And I'll speak more about their powerful story of pilot engagement. Their pilot-driven, ironclad campaign to rally support for their merger resulted in an approval vote that went beyond all expectations. Well beyond. To say it was a success, yep, that's true. It was a success. But that would also be an understatement. An incredible 93% engagement. But for the strong participation from the FAPA leadership, right back there, and the true desire of the membership to be informed and actively participate in their career-changing decision, the result would have been much different. It's inspiring to see the Frontier pilots' collective sense of pride and energy. I look forward to the official vote of the executive board later this morning and welcoming them as the newest members of the Airline Pilots Association International. In recent months, we've seen other strong examples of pilot engagement. On April 4th, the managements of Alaska Airlines and Virgin America announced their merger. Since getting that official news, the leadership of both pilot groups have kept strong and open lines of communication. Just as impressive to me was the proactive dialogue that took place before the announcement between Chris and Joe, their respective leaders. Pilot engagement at the leadership level diffuses rumors and stops the damaging talk, which we all know are hard to claw back from. Since the announcement, the MEC has formed a joint negotiating committee to carry out the business of transitioning from two pilot groups to one. The JNC is working now to identify priorities for negotiations on a transition and process agreement on behalf of both pilot groups. That agreement will cover a couple of key items: the processing and the negotiation of a joint collective bargaining agreement and the integrated seniority list. Many of us in this room know what's in store for both of these pilot groups. Quick show of hands. How many here have been through a merger? Show of hands. Is that for your proxy, John, or have you been through 2 mergers, you poor? Okay. So again, I didn't get it. I was too focused on John having 2 arms up. How many, again, have been through a merger? Yeah, so Joe and Chris, look around. There's a lot of resources to tap into here. We all know that mergers are difficult. Yeah, they're very difficult. But these 2 groups from the onset have shown that they're engaged and they will be active participants in the final outcome. The foundation of respect and communication they've already laid will help this process along. And they have our collective support and resources to help them through the timeline. If everyone goes in with the same mindset and focuses on the long-term goals, we will all succeed. I guarantee it. So pilot engagement is another reason why our recent collective bargaining efforts have been so successful. In the span of a year, we've reached 12 new contracts. Our pilots are indeed focused on these contracts and their careers. First Air, Peter, which reached a 4-year tentative agreement last week, will hopefully be lucky number 13. Those pilots are close to joining the pilots at Canadian North, Commute Air, Jazz, United, Kelowna Flightcraft, Bearskin, Trans-States, ASA, FedEx, ExpressJet, Sun Country, and Air Transat. The First Air TA includes significant improvements to their current working agreement, and the MEC fully endorses it. Once the negotiating team reviews all sections, the TA will go to all First Air pilots for membership ratification. They're shooting for road shows to start in early June. So, Peter, congratulations to you. Congratulations to you, sir. The MEC, the negotiating committee, the ALPA staff, and all who had a hand in concluding this agreement. Great job. 11 pilot groups plus Frontier, making that number 12, are currently in negotiations. Several are coming to pivotal junctures. 97% of the Hawaiian pilots, for example, participated in their strike vote, with an overwhelming 99% approval. Hoon Lee couldn't be with us this week because he's back in Honolulu with his pilot group, engaging. They held a rally yesterday in conjunction with the company's shareholders meeting, and will picket the Honolulu airport next Wednesday. This follows tremendous turnout at their first informational picketing event, where basically every pilot who wasn't out of the country or otherwise working showed up. They hope to reach an agreement with the Hawaiian management very soon. Delta pilots are also ramping up. The pilot group entered mediation on March 31st and continues negotiating with the company. They're making progress on several open sections, including sick leave and work rules, but a number of items remain outstanding. Delta pilots will conduct informational picketing at all bases on June 24th and are aiming to have a contract by the close of the summer. The Air Wisconsin pilot group recently started a new campaign called Sunrise or Sunset, which asks their company to lay out the business plan for future flying, as their contract with American Airlines expires in February of 2018. Recently, I appointed First Officer Richard Swindell to support Chris and the Air Wisconsin MEC to work with their company to find out what the future holds for these pilots. He'll also help Chris develop pilot group communications and other family outreach to keep our members informed so they can make informed decisions about their future and career. Thank you, Todd, for making Richard available. Last thought on bargaining. And you've heard me say this before, so I don't want to bore you with it. But keep this in mind. If you are honest and straightforward with your pilots, they will engage for you. And they will come to the right conclusion on your questions to them every single time. Honest, straightforward communications. I want to move on to highlight the work of Captain Paul Ryder. Paul's been working with the Fee for Departure pilots in his role as a National Resource Coordinator. Under his leadership, ALPA is offering free interview workshops to assist pilots who are looking to move on in their careers. We've seen active pilot engagement in these workshops, with 150 registered for the latest class in Herndon, and already 85 signed up for the installment coming up next week in Denver. Paul also set out to increase the percentage of fee-for-departure pilots participating in government affairs issues by launching Coffee Equals Action program. This program is designed to increase pilot engagement by encouraging pilots to directly advocate for the future of their profession by participating in calls to action. Through a series of events in crew rooms throughout the U.S., they added hundreds of pilot voices to our pressing issues, namely the pilot pay shortage. Moving the call to action numbers here from 1,152 in October of last year, just 6 short months ago, to over 3,500 in April of this year. Thanks, Paul. I really appreciate your efforts. Earlier, I mentioned organizing efforts. Since the highly successful Virgin America unionizing campaign concluded last summer, we've continued our efforts in Canada to inform and educate the pilots of 2 pilot groups, Porter and WestJet, about the benefits of ALPA membership. The discussions have been lively, and the engagement of these pilots has been encouraging. We're also continuing our merger discussions with the Canadian Cathay Pacific pilots through their independent union, the Aircrew Officers Association of Canada. So many of our pilot leaders, many of you in this room, have helped in these endeavors. Specifically, though, I want to thank Captains DePete, Coet, and Adamus for all their efforts to work with these pilots and the staff to put this important work at the forefront. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. So move on to an issue that's kind of important to us all in the U.S., because it's the foundation of how our industry moves forward. In February, the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee chairman introduced the FAA reauthorization bill. In April, the Senate passed its FAA reauthorization bill. The Senate bill has been a hard-earned win for ALPA. I just want to be clear about that. The Senate bill was a hard-earned win for us. We consider it a win. And to be clear, we were pitted against exceptionally strong opposition. And I want to be clear, it is not a perfect bill in the Senate, but the gains we made are meaningful. Now we wait for the House and the Senate to try and align their bills, and ALPA will continue to engage in that process. I'll spare you, I know you're happy to hear that, the line-by-line comparison. But I do want to touch on some of the highlights in the Senate bill. Importantly, and for the first time, we made progress on this issue. It mandates physically installed secondary barriers on all new commercial passenger aircraft. This mandate was included in the House committee bill as well, and it was all due in thanks to the unyielding efforts of a lot of ALPA volunteers. It includes strong enforcement provisions for unmanned aircraft systems and understands the need to keep UAS away from airports and aircraft, especially during critical phases of flight. This is important as well. It requires full harmonization with ICAO technical instructions regarding the air transportation of lithium batteries. Captain DePete will cover more of that in his report to you next. It included, at ALPA's urging, a waiver and appeals process for airline workers who may erroneously fail background checks or fall within the expanded list of disqualifying offenses. Importantly, it reiterates the pilot and command authority over the safe operation of the aircraft. It fully authorizes the Pacific airports to keep en route alternate airfields available, and it increases the civil penalty for shining a laser at an aircraft. All very important provisions. But I want to talk about now what it doesn't include, because it's equally important to discuss what we were able to prevent from getting into this bill. We were able to prevent changes, and this is key because it was a difficult fight, to the minimum first officer qualifications. Not through a lack of trying, elements of the regional airline industry pushed for a congressional directive that would lower first officer requirements for FAR 121. We were able to hold it off. We were able to prevent provisions for cameras in the cockpit. We were able to prevent any additional requirement for psychological testing in the wake of the Germanwings accident. And we were able to prevent the Railway Labor Act from being changed in ways that would have threatened our union rights. Pilot engagement and action, that's what enabled us to prevent these onerous provisions from coming forward. ALPA members, along with staff, are engaged at every level. I want to be clear. Identifying opportunities and pitfalls every single day. They're advocating day in, day out, 24/7 for our profession. And recently, when we asked for your engagement, the results are impressive. Before the UAL pilot group blew everybody out of the water with greater than 50% participation on the Deny NAI call to action that I mentioned earlier in my remarks, the FedEx pilot group set a record for a call to action with their pilot group participation. Going above 40%, remember, normally it runs in the low 20s, going above 40% on the lithium battery call to action, a top priority for your union's legislative, regulatory, and international agenda. Let's be clear, and this is important. We want to ensure that a fire due to a lithium battery will never again bring down an aircraft. Sure, participation rates and breaking records, that's great, and it sure feels good to talk about it in those terms, but that's not what it's all about. The more successful we are with regard to participation rates on issues that matter the most, the better off we'll be in combating the real dangers like that of carrying lithium batteries on our aircraft. Though we applaud the steps put forward by the Senate and ICAO, we believe more must be done to ensure the safety of lithium batteries shipped by air. The FedEx pilots are also still addressing the need for one level of safety in flight and duty time regulations. Senator Barbara Boxer did offer an amendment to the Senate bill that would have required science-based fatigue regulations for all cargo operations. With the support of Chuck and the entire FedEx MEC, we supported the measure. However, the Senate did not adopt the measure, or the amendment. ALPA's been sounding this alarm for decades. And when the facts and silence finally ruled the day for our passenger carrier members, an ill-conceived cargo carve-out was inserted. This quickly snatched away our belief that those in the executive branch also, like us, put safety first. It was clear they did not. One last item to note on the FAA reauthorization bill. We did oppose the House bill. We opposed the House bill because it did not advance safety. First and foremost, we will only support an FAA reauthorization measure that puts safety first, and the House bill missed the mark. It also missed the mark with its air traffic organization spinoff, a proposal that failed the litmus test that this body passed last May. First and foremost, it just wasn't fair. General and business aviation did not have to pay to play. They were given a complete pass on paying into the system. Second, general and business aviation were guaranteed equal access into the airspace. Example, you'd be waiting at LaGuardia, sequenced for takeoff, with your 200 passengers, sequenced behind a G5 out of Teterboro with a single billionaire on board. And they have equal access and don't pay a dime into the system. We'd be waiting on that single billionaire with our 200 passengers. Third, general and business aviation were granted 4 seats on the Board of Governors. So they get to govern it, they don't have to pay into it, and they have equal access to it. That was unacceptable. On a positive side, the proposal did keep intact the collective bargaining rights and the collective bargaining rights of the air traffic controllers, and it did put pilots on the board of directors with 1 seat. Those were 2 non-negotiable items for us as well. In the end, though, Congress did not truly address our issues, our long-term issues, in this silly season lawmaking during the presidential elections. As usual, they have thus far, kicked the can down the road. While we did avoid a government shutdown this time around, it's not close to being the long-term, fully funded bill that aviation needs to compete in the global marketplace. It's a disappointment, to be clear. But that's our fight. That's our fight. Like our 85 years of history dictates, we will keep fighting for progress. We will engage our pilots in the fight to deny NAI and to ensure the future of our profession. We will engage our pilots in continuing fight for safety, security, and pilot assistance provisions our industry needs to remain the safest, most secure mode of transportation the world has ever known. And we will engage our pilots to ensure the fight for our contracts to include quality of life provisions and compelling career path provisions that will engage our members for today and tomorrow. Our association, in its earliest days, grew from the strength of 12 key men. They provided the leadership and engagement needed at the time to advocate on behalf of other airline pilots. Right now, I look around this room, not even though, including those seated in the back, and I see many key men and women. Thank you, thank you, thank you for your avid leadership and your passionate engagement on all our issues. Thank you for fighting this fight and every fight. And thank you for pushing ALPA, pushing to the next level of success. Thank you very much.